Right, are you ready for the slickest link ever?
I'm ready.
Right, I suppose that means that's all that... Oh, no.
Let us begin then with some follow-up. We got some information on the Reddit about Carbide's batteries. We were discussing in the last episode that the last-minute arrival of the batteries seemed a little bit scripted, a little bit too good to be true. You know, it was sort of, did that actually happen the way it happened or not? And what we've learned from a couple of Reddit comments is that Carbide's fight against Gabriel was on one day, and then their next fight was the following day, so they had time to courier batteries up from Birmingham overnight to them, and they did arrive just in time. That was a genuine thing. The stress there was genuine for them, and we also learnt that they could have used Terahertz's batteries. They were the only ones around that could have replaced Carbide's batteries there, so they could probably have fought anyway.
That's the really key bit for me. You know, yes, I completely understand. Yeah, it was a really good comment as well. That information all came in. Makes a really good point about how a robot that's built to quite fine tolerances, you can't just throw any old batteries in there. You know, it's got to be the right ones.
Yeah.
You can't just chuck something smaller in and let it rattle around or somehow make room for something bigger. But the fact that there was a completely matching set of batteries there they could have used means that they weren't in the danger it was portrayed as being. It wouldn't be ideal. You know, you want to know that your batteries are fresh and reliable. You want to know what they've been through before. But worst case scenario, it was a slightly unreliable carbide going in. And it's that kind of... Is it even a white lie, or is it... I don't know if it's worse than a white lie or not, but it's that storytelling that kind of bugged me with it.
Mm.
And luckily, this episode had none of that, so that's fine. This is going to be a moany episode, isn't it? This is going to start in a moany place.
I think what we should do is go straight into the reason Sam does not like this episode and try and get it all out of the way right up front and try and get it done in less than half an hour. So,
one thing I want to say first,
yeah,
before we get into that, is there's some good stuff in this episode. There are some really good individual moments of action.
Yeah.
And they're great. But the amount of other stuff you had to wade through to get to it was not okay.
No. It was a bit painful. They had, like, because there was this episode is 2 fights short for reasons we'll get onto, and or basically 2 fights short anyway. And because of that, about 40 minutes of this episode is kind of just fluff and lots of interviewee things and repeats of bits of fights and stuff. It's just a bit, you know, they didn't have a lot to work with in terms of action, and the fight action is the bit that we want to see. So, you know, the fewer fights you have in an episode, the worse it is, I think.
In fairness, some fluff is acceptable.
Yeah.
Some fluff is good fluff. Bucky the mascot is good fluff. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but 40 minutes of it is a bit tedious.
It's far from ideal.
So I guess the other sort of like big thing that came across for me in this episode that made me sort of not enjoy watching this so much is the way some of the teams, well, 4 of the teams are kind of represented, I have in square quotes here, by the BBC. So you've got the first one I guess we want to talk about is the traction team, the kids, who are shown to be immensely capable. So, like, to be clear, I love the fact there are kids on this. I think that's great, and I love that they're shown to be actually doing things on the robot and involved in it. But I don't believe, and I'd love to be wrong, but I don't believe that they built that robot entirely by themselves, and I certainly don't believe that they maintained it by themselves, as shown in the episode. They're shown to be making big repairs, making big modifications to their robot, and I strongly suspect that there were definitely adults present helping them with that, or possibly even doing it. And then that wasn't shown, which I think is a bit disingenuous. And I was curious, Ryan, as a part-time teacher, ex-teacher, I don't know, someone who has got certainly more experience teaching than I do.
Interesting STEM education, I would put myself as having.
Interesting STEM education. I'd be curious to know what you thought of it.
First of all, absolutely love that team. And I actually really like the fact that the kids are at the centre of it, at least in telly. One of my big complaints about Frostbite was that the teacher did half the talking. So I'm really pleased to see that the kids did get to lead it and have some ownership. There are a few times where you see that there is an adult helping them. There would have to be. That just makes sense. And I think, based on basically no knowledge, it seems to me that those kids are probably about as capable as you're going to see kids that age being. And I think it's better to overstate that than to understate it, if that makes sense, as in the way it was portrayed on TV. I'd rather they did focus on all the shots they have of them doing stuff practically. When it comes to actually making the robot, it was a bought robot that they modified.
Okay.
That's not something they've made from scratch. That was an old bomb disposal robot, I think, that was donated to the school as a sort of running base.
Amazing.
And they then basically, by the looks of it, added the pneumatics for the grabber.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool.
And I mean, you wouldn't expect a team of kids to build something like that independently. You wouldn't, as an educator, put them in a position of trying, really. You would give them something to work on and add to. That's kind of the basis of how you do everything in education. You start off by imitating and improving in the hope that one day you can create independently. You do that in writing, you do that in anything. So doing it with this kind of makes sense as an approach. And I think it kind of, in a good way, insulates them from the worst of possible failures. You know, you want them to get out there with something that runs and works. So I completely understand why you would do things that way. So this is one part I'm not going to moan about.
Excellent. Well, we can move swiftly on then. I think that's a very good point. I mean, I don't hate the fact it happened. It just struck me as a bit odd, but absolutely fine nonetheless. The stuff that I think is less fine, that I'm more actively unhappy about. Team Vulture. They make it hard for the BBC, the people editing, I think. But I think there was a couple of moments where one of the guys, and I maybe this stood out to me because I so strongly identify with what he was feeling and can so strongly relate to where he was at that time. But he's sort of like, he's being quite honest. He's like, I'm feeling stressed. I'd rather you didn't point the camera at us right now. Let's just do this, and then we can do the camera stuff a bit later. And I think that's fair enough for him to say. I think if I were in a situation, I would like to think I'm cynical enough just not to say it, because you never know what the people editing are going to do. And what they did, I think, is a bit mean, and include that. I think it's just a bit, I think favourable to the BBC. Maybe they just didn't have anything else. Maybe that was just sort of it, because every single time they tried to get a camera, like pieced a camera out of them, that's what happened. Or maybe they had other things and they could have done something else, but they chose to sort of put that in there for whatever reason. I don't know. It made me sad. I think a big part of that is because I feel like I would be much the same. I feel like I can so strongly relate to where that guy was, and I think it's unfortunate. And I think it's a bit mean of the BBC to do it, really.
And this is the big argument of the episode, isn't it? The way people come across on camera, the control that the producers do have over that, and whether they've used that control, not correctly as such, but in I don't even want to say responsibly, but somewhere in there is a word I'm looking for,
I think they should always try to portray the people positively, Like I feel like, so my other 2 points about this is two other teams that I think are unfairly sort of shown on camera, and they're unfairly shown in a negative way. I would much rather with the kids, they show it in a very positive way. It's a positive spin, and that's fine. I'm much happier with that. But like these other sort of, Vulture and Rapid and Apex, all those teams, these all have this kind of problem where there's bits of them that are shown in isolation or whatever that make them look worse than they are. And I just think it's unfair, and I don't see, and unnecessary, I guess. I would rather they try to put a positive spin on people if they can.
I don't want to see them put an exclusively positive spin on people. I want to see them put no spin at all.
Yeah, no spin at all would be ideal, but unlikely.
And I realise how unrealistic that is, but...
Yeah.
And this is part of what I don't like about the new style of Robot Wars, the fact that the way things are put together, it's easier than ever for them to misrepresent people if they want to. And they're really shooting for characters and stories here. And character turns into caricature on TV, doesn't it? So it's sort of, oh look, here's Rapid, they're rich and a bit smarmy. Oh look, here's Craig Danby, he's a bit angry again. It was bad enough when they did that the first time round. To do it again is really annoying for me.
Yeah.
The Vulture team, I thought they handled things quite well and almost didn't allow that to happen, in that they have been firm but polite with, we'd rather we weren't interrupted right now.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think they made it hard for the BBC in terms of anything. I think the Vulture team were probably the most accurately represented, maybe. I don't know, in terms of what actually happened, but I would sort of, I don't know. I don't know. The thing is, because I wasn't there, I don't know what happened. I don't know what footage the BBC had to work with in this. So I don't know. It just struck me as a bit mean including that kind of thing, because that's not stuff that he was saying to the camera for television. He was saying it to the person behind the camera, and then they used it anyway.
I mean, I think that is fair game to use, isn't it? Because
I don't know. Well, it is and it isn't. It's sort of like it's fair game. Like this, like I said, this sort of the cynical part of me is like, well, yeah, of course they're going to use it. You know, they're gonna do whatever they want with that footage. This is just a fact of being on television. You know, I think he just shouldn't have said it if he at all could have not said it, because you know anything you say they're going to use.
But people shouldn't have to worry about that. And bear in mind that these are not people who have, you know, extensive media training and things.
No, not at all.
This isn't like a professional sport where you can make that argument of, oh, well, you're doing it at this level, so criticism and scrutiny are part of the territory. This is people doing their hobby, and we get to look in on it.
But this is sort of like why I feel like it was a bit mean of to include it, because it was like, you know, just don't have it there. Just why is it there? It doesn't add anything. It just sort of makes us, I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't help the team put their best foot forward. You know. I don't know.
But the BBC aren't interested in that with really any of the teams, are they? Granted, they're going to portray the kids well because that's what you do. Although that gets on the territory, you know, that sneaks into the territory of another argument that I definitely don't want to go down from last series. It all comes back to, let's just portray what actually happened. This isn't the X Factor. We don't need this stuff. There's a really good clip from a Charlie Brooker programme, one of the early series of Screen Wipe, I think, that I will probably throw in the show notes, that gives a really good breakdown of how TV people do this. Because I've seen a lot of people saying, well, you know, if these people didn't want what they said to be taken out of context, they shouldn't have said it. But at that point, you just can't say anything.
Yeah, there's nothing you can say.
It's another thing that we're kind of having to talk about that isn't the robots. It's an unnecessary distraction from what we're here for. And we're partly at fault for having the discussion, but the fact that so many viewers, not just necessarily the casual viewers, but the more interested people have kind of gone along with that and gone, ooh, I really don't like that Rapid team. Ooh, they're a bit smug. When surely anybody who's followed this sport for any amount of time will know that if a Roboteer wasn't a nice person, they wouldn't be getting close to any of this. The community would have got them straight away. And I really think that as a viewer, you have a responsibility to understand how far from reality what you get to see is.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing is that, again, as we're recording, Rapid are doing their AMA. And I'm looking through, and there's already so many questions, not necessarily about it, but kind of alluding to it in a slightly awkward way. It isn't the conversation we want to be having.
The Rapids thing was so unfair because it's sort of like, because it's very effective. Like, you come away from it and your first reaction, even sort of like me with the critical hat on, first reaction is like, oh man, the Rapid team, they're a bit, don't like them very much. They just bought their way in. When they haven't, if you like just stop and think for a second, you think there are other robots that exist that cost at least that much. Why the BBC kept banging on about it, I do know why, to try and paint
we know
this
exactly
image.
why.
And then they do that, and then you come away, and then I don't enjoy the other things, like the we'll go into more detail, but like Rapid, they are another very well driven robot, and they're very tactical, and well-driven and tactical might remind you of someone, Michael, a person that we both like. And then because the producers sort of spin the Rapid team in this kind of negative way, exactly the same sort of driving tactics and all that kind of stuff makes us sort of like them even less. There's just, I just think it's just and it annoys me because it works so damn effectively, even on someone that knows it's happening. You sort of come away from thinking, oh man, that was a stupid fight. Didn't enjoy that fight. Like seeing a robot that I really like get utterly owned by this team was annoying because you don't like the team. Whereas if that happened with a team that you did like, owning another team that you like, then it'd be fine. It'd be fun. It'd be, oh yeah, that was a great fight, wonderful. And it's sort of like it takes you to sort of step back and think about it and go, let's actually ignore the way that Rapid are portrayed as being the rich kids that bought the way in when they didn't, and look at actually what they're doing. And it's actually, they've got a really good robot this time, and they've driven it really well.
The money thing is a multifaceted thing that I find fascinating because it has so many parallels with football. I'm sorry to be doing this to you again, but I'm going to run with this thread. It is a really British thing to not like someone who you feel hasn't paid their dues at the bottom to work up. So, you know, people look at teams like Chelsea, where they had a massive injection of cash, and suddenly they were brilliant because they could buy everything. And people look at that and they go, oh, that's not fair. And it'd be really tempting to look at the Rapid team as doing the same thing. Because, oh, look, they've suddenly showed up in Series 9 with a really expensive machine. And, oh, look, it didn't work very well. Isn't that hilarious? And people were fine with it then because it didn't work. But now it's working. That's when people get angry about it. And the fact is, they have paid their dues. You know, they have, over many, many years, built up some very high-level engineering skills and also a business behind it that has funded what they're doing. That's down to their hard work. They're welcome to do with that what they want. If I had a massive disposable income, I would probably spend it on a really good robot. We all would.
Yeah, exactly. Who wouldn't do that? Anyone who wants to compete in Robot Wars, if they had £25,000 to spend on the damn thing, they would. Of course they would.
Yeah. Granted, mine would be expensive and stupid, but that's not the point. People wouldn't mind if they hadn't won. People would have actively enjoyed it if they hadn't won.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we know that. It happened last time. It happened in Series 9.
And I'll freely admit, I was right on that Schadenfreude bandwagon. Completely. But that was more because of the way it went out. In terms of, you know, a crappier robot wouldn't have had the issue they had. That I did find quite amusing.
Yeah.
It's just... There's so many angles on this, it's really hard to try and stay on one line of reasoning.
Well, I think what we can safely say is it's a bit irritating. And shall we? The final person I think was a bit unfairly represented that I just want to really, really quickly try and do, because I think it will be quick, is Craig Danby, who is sort of shown to have a bit of a strop, I guess. He's sort of like throwing things around, and it's like, why have you included that? That just seems a bit unfair. But then I've since learned, having read some of the Reddit, that appears to be taken completely out of context. Mm-hmm. It is my understanding that Team Thor were like taping their tools down and just
Team Thor, really big team of
that
people,
really big team. I say Team Thor because I can't remember his name. Jason kept taping his tools down, and then again, my understanding that it was, you know, there was retaliation of like taping his tools down and stuff as well. It's just like a friendly back and forth bit of banter, and then they've taken this one moment that makes it look like Craig is really angry about what happened with Apex in his melee or whatever, and throwing things around. It's like, that's just, you know, out of context. Even if it wasn't out of context, why include it? It's just, yeah.
And wouldn't the truth have been better?
Yeah, I'd love, like, if all this stupid fluff that no one cares about, the fluff of like these two teams like ragging on each other would be so much better. I'm sure you could get like Dara involved, like him taping things down as well. It would like so much you could do, you know. Pit Dara against Angela. It'd be great.
The worst part for me is that I know, as we're recording this, that when I listen back to it, I'm going to think of 5 or 6 more other things I should have said that would have sounded really intelligent and really balanced, and I'm not going to be happy with the way I've put a lot of these ideas across. But it is just a stupid and complex situation that we shouldn't have to deal with.
Yeah.
And I suppose the last word I will have on it is that I hate the thought that any team might be put off of entering or re-entering by this.
Yeah.
But I really think that could happen.
If I entered and then I was shown like Craig or like the guys from Vulture or even like the guys from Rapid, I would not enter again because it's just not worth it, I don't think. And maybe that's me being really shallow, who knows?
Well, no, absolutely. I think this sort of thing, as we've seen with people like Dave Laurie, it can really mess with your self-esteem, can't it? You are pouring hundreds and hundreds of hours into a machine, which, first of all, may or may not even work, and then you're getting scrutinised on top of it. And I suppose I can only hope at this point that we've been as consistent as I hope we've been in terms of not criticising people and only criticising machines.
I think we've either criticised machines or the faceless people behind the camera.
Oh yeah, editors, they're fair game. The only team I can think of that I've ever criticised, and I've done it mostly as a joke, I hope that came across clearly, is the Crackers and Smash guys for never wanting to finish a fight.
But that's based on evidence that we can see. They never want to finish a fight.
Yeah, that's just objectively true, please. Shall we take a look at the robots then?
Yes, let's move on.
Move on to talking about the thing we're here to talk about. And I've now got to scroll through a whole page of unused notes about all of that crap. Are we going alphabetical again?
Whatever order you want.
Let's start then with Bucky the robot.
Okay, then.
A well-made, terrible robot.
Is it Bucky that's making all the stupid noises? That's got the big screeching noise, or is that someone else?
I can only assume so, and I don't know if it's intentional or not. I feel like it's a kind of thing they do on purpose. This is a robot that I can't help thinking doesn't have that much untapped potential.
No, I think we probably saw everything that it can do in this episode.
And I'm completely okay with that because I absolutely love the thing.
I don't know how I feel about it. Meh, I guess. Decidedly in the middle. Take it or leave it.
This fits in with my crusade for interesting robots. It is one of those robots that has not been, well, if it was designed to be a viable competition-winning design, then something's gone a bit wrong. But I feel like it probably wasn't.
I would hope not.
The only... Well, I'd like to say the only criticism I come up with it. There are two criticisms I would make of it as a competitive design. One, the lack of self-righting, especially from its side.
Yep.
That seems like the kind of thing you can preempt. And number two, it did seem to struggle for traction a lot, especially in that first melee.
Yeah. Which
I think was just down to wheel placement and weight distribution and a very low ground clearance on the front.
See, it's interesting you say the ground clearance. I think it's sort of like... I don't think... We saw it get like a bite on a robot once. I think it managed to grab Vulture at some point, which is cool. I was really glad to sort of see that weapon do what it was meant to do. I was kind of worried we wouldn't. And I'm very glad that we did see it. But I think although it is low to the ground at the front, I don't think it's sharp enough, I guess, at the front. And I think the sort of angle of the ramp or the wedge to sort of put it in the jaws there is way too steep. I don't think they can. I think it's very hard for them to actually get a grip on a robot, which is a shame.
I think it had a good low ground clearance to begin with, but I'm not sure that front wedge was particularly robust. So I think it did get dinged up quite a lot. But again, it isn't a design that has been put together to be optimized and effective. It's a fun thing. If I made it, I'd have been happy just to see it work once. And it gave us a few great moments, especially the self-righting over at the sidewall, where it kind of gripped on for a while and then got itself... That was absolutely beautiful.
That was quite funny, yeah.
And it is the kind of design that the BBC could so easily have rejected in favour of something with competition-winning potential. And to be honest, this was a bad heat to have this robot in. This heat probably needed more highly competitive robots. But I'm still glad it was there because it's a fun thing, it's interesting, and it's not something we've seen before.
That is true. We have not seen it before.
Next up, we have Rapid. I'm not sure there's even any point at this point. But...
Rapid is a lot better this time. It's like I sort of said earlier. It's very well driven, and you see the beginnings of their sort of like of their kind of tactics. Even in this heat, they're trying, or this melee, sorry, they're trying to use the arena hazards to their advantage. They try a couple of times to shove someone, I forget who now, into sort of Matilda and stuff. So they even now they're using those techniques and stuff, which is cool to see. My criticism of it, which is similar to last year, is that the reset timer on their flipper is huge. And it's interesting that how this affects their style of fighting and driving. You can see they make a flip and then they run away until that flip is down again. They know that they're weak, especially when they're fighting someone with an axe, for example. They know that they can't risk being hit on that flipper while it's open, or would rather not. So they do a very good job of running away, which is interesting. Again, I think because of the way they're shown, that is, initial viewing was kind of seen as a bad thing. It's, oh, you cowards running away, paid your way and now you're running away. But like, if you set all that aside, I think that's the right thing to do, given how long it takes their robot to reset the flipper. I'd love to know why it takes so long.
My understanding is that they were having issues with the pneumatics all through this episode, and therefore the flipper was running at reduced power. I don't know if that would have affected the closing. I'm not going to pretend that I know a huge amount about pneumatics, but maybe that's part of it. But you're right, it was also like that last time round.
Yeah, my only thought is it just takes a long time for them to vent the pressure out of the ram after they've pushed the thing up, right? So they've got that piston which pushes the flipper up, and then I guess it just takes a little while for all that gas to get out again to lower the pressure enough for the bungees to pull it down. That's sort of the only thing I can think that's happening, but...
So that would infer that the issue is almost the bore of the cylinder, in that they do have a lot of gas in there to clear, which is why it's so powerful in the first place. Although I may have just been completely wrong about how everything in pneumatics works there, and I immediately regret saying all of that.
I don't know if that it takes a long time for it to get out once they've started venting it, or it just takes a little while for the venting to start for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, a really good robot, I think, this time. I am very good robot.
But is it a boring robot? That's the question. That's the big argument with it, apart from the team and the money.
I think we just have to see it in harder fights, I think they didn't really have... I don't think it is boring. So they got through to the final against Terahertz, and that was a good fight, I think. I really enjoyed watching that. Enjoyed, maybe not the right word. I enjoyed watching it the second time once I'd got over my initial feelings towards Rapid. So that was a really good fight. And I think if and when Rapid can fight better robots than what they got this time, then I think we'll get more exciting fights out of them, I hope. But who knows? I'd love to see how tough they actually are against weapons that can do big damage.
You have to imagine that against horizontals, they'll be very solid until their flippers open.
Yeah. I think they'll do exactly the same thing they did now, though. They'll do the flipper when they can. They're very conservative with it, and then once they've flipped it, they'll just run until it's down again.
Imagine so. The one thing I find with Rapid is that it does lack drama. So think of Eruption when that's fighting. It looks very nippy, it turns very quickly, and it's constantly wheeling up or flipping itself over when it flips. Those things add drama. From a competitive point of view, they're not particularly good news. They're things that I think designers and drivers of flippers have come to accept as a limitation of the design. And Rapid is a robot that hasn't accepted that and has got rid of that. You know, it stays really well planted when it flips, and I think that's largely due to the sort of four-wheel drive system influencing the shape on the rear. So it's more effective, but less visually interesting. And the way it drives as well, because it's four-wheel drive, it doesn't seem to quite have that sharpness on the turn, which I'm guessing makes it a lot easier to drive. But again, visually, it's just a bit less interesting. And I think that's the reason that people are looking at this and being bored by it when they're not by Eruption.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think this is a robot that will grow on me the more I see it be effective. I think I like the fact that it's a really well-engineered thing. I like the fact that they've dealt with the instability from flippers like flipping themselves over a little bit and stuff. So I think, you know, the engineer, the do it properly person inside of me really appreciates this robot. But I completely see where you're coming from. Like I completely get, you know, when you've got a robot that is very effective and not doing big obvious damage, yeah, it's not quite as good for television.
Basically, it's so good that it doesn't look as good as it is. Which I suppose, you know, that is one of the biggest compliments you can pay something, the idea of making something look easy. That's what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
Up next, we have, at the other end of the scale, Traction.
Oh, Traction.
They made things look easy by never being tested. Really.
Yeah, they were sort of taken out in a fairly easy way, really. Like they were sort of flipped out a couple of times, which a big impact, but not lethal to the robot. And then, yeah, they missed out on... Well, they basically missed out on two fights. What I alluded to earlier with this episode of being 2 fight shorts. One of the fights is between Traction and Rapid, and it lasts about 6 seconds, so it doesn't really count as a fight. And then they missed one because Vulture had to retire. I still love this robot. I still love Traction. I love the way it looks so much.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Completely sold on the aesthetics.
I'm a little bit upset that it's got to go into the 10 way, because let's face it, it's not going to survive that, is it?
That's not going to... Well, I don't know. Like, I think if it were driven by adults, I don't think it would survive. I do think that people will do enough to immobilize it, but then not do any more if they can help it. Obviously, 10 robots, absolute mayhem. Who knows what will happen, but...
I think anything in that arena that doesn't win is in serious trouble.
How long do you reckon they will give the person who wins that to repair their robot in time for like the main competition thing?
Based on the reboot so far, about 25 minutes.
Because I think they're gonna,
including the time it takes to get out of the arena.
Yeah, they're gonna have this wild card that is just in pieces, and then it might as well not be there.
So Thor.
Oh, what? Because of what happened last time?
Well, time before.
Yeah.
A wild card that was in pieces through the whole thing.
Yeah. This is true. Same again. Such fun.
The really good thing with Traction is they've come in with a design that completely does not fit with the meta of what they're up against.
No, not at all.
But then have managed to borrow a single component that basically took care of the one fight against a kind of meta design.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this idea of lending a component?
I don't think it would happen to any other team. Is it because it's kids? I don't know. That's a good question, actually. I hadn't really given it any thought about whether or not it kind of detracts from the legitimacy of this sporting competition, doesn't it?
See, that's my thinking, and I was okay with it because it was going on to what is, objectively one of the weaker robots.
Yeah.
So I was kind of okay with it, and I was almost going to sort of accuse the Vulture team of some cynicism, but I'm fairly convinced that's not the case in terms of, we'll give it to them and it won't make any difference. I think they did that with genuinely good intentions, and I'm really pleased they did. But most other teams you probably wouldn't help out in that way. What we do see a lot of is sort of lending spares and things to get them back up to their original state. But I don't think we'd often see a team, improve an opponent like that.
I think now that I'm thinking about it, and now that I'm thinking, what if this was another team? What if this was a robot that was already good, and then someone came along and helped them make it even better in some way? And I think for the sake of consistency, I'm gonna have to come down on this and say that actually I don't think they should have done that. I think it's a very well-intentioned thing, but maybe the rules of the competition should be adjusted slightly, such that you can't fundamentally change the way someone else's robot works. And surely at that point they're going in without an active weapon, now that I think about it more, because they took their active weapon off.
It was attached to the pneumatic ram, I think, so it would lift.
Okay.
That's more of an assumption than knowledge, though.
Yeah. Even then, yeah. Shenanigans, that's what this is.
But again, it's the kind of shenanigans that you very easily let go because you don't think it's going to affect the overall result. And then suddenly kind of affected the overall result.
If the only reason you're going to let something go is because you don't think it's going to affect the outcome, that's not a good enough reason to let something go. I think,
not at all.
For the sake of consistency, I'm going to have to say that it shouldn't have happened. And yeah, it does affect the outcome of the fight somewhat, or the competition somewhat.
What I'm now imagining is Carbide just lending their bar to Frostbite. 3 minutes later, it's just about up to speed.
What they should do is do the other way. Lend Frostbite the drive motor, and then watch Frostbite's bar tear itself apart.
You see, that's more sabotage than anything, surely.
Oh dear.
This melee brought up two very interesting things for me.
Yep.
One, Jonathan Pierce is getting a lot more creative freedom in his commentary than he did in the last two series. And I'm completely okay with that.
So ridiculous.
I have noticed, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last episode, there has actually been repetition of an intro. It was some Miley Cyrus reference he made when introducing Matilda that was in both Heat A and Heat B.
Oh dear, he's repeating himself. He's repeating himself.
No. No. Leave that in the edit to shame yourself.
No, I feel no shame. That was brilliant.
This is true. The other thing I noticed that I'd kind of theorised before, partly from Heat B, is that it's become very apparent that under 18s must not be allowed in the arena.
Why is that?
Because every other team gets interviewed in the arena next to their robot, except for the kids.
Yeah. So
I'm assuming on boring health and safety grounds, they're not allowed in there.
How lame. Yeah, I hadn't really picked up on that. Yeah, that is a good point.
Because I first noticed it with Toby and Gabriel.
Yeah.
That he didn't go in, even though he is technically the team captain.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed it then and didn't really think much of it. I just sort of assumed that Toby just wanted his dad to do it instead or something. I don't know if he was a bit nervous, but then that doesn't seem like him now. Now that I say this out loud and voice it, that doesn't seem like him at all. So yeah. Yeah, I think you must be right.
I mean, there's something we've all had to say before.
Oh, I know. Ryan, you were right. This is just terrible.
Not even close. Apart from that, though, there isn't a huge amount to say about that melee, apart from the beautiful visual of Bucky the mascot taking up far too much room in that control pod.
The other thing that stood out to me in this is the beginning of Jonathan Pierce really trying to overhype Fog of War. And I'm going to be very brief with Fog of War.
Yeah, I'm not going to be, so that's wasted effort on your part.
I'm sorry, audience, I'm sorry. The quote I just want to give is, the Fog of War was a key in this battle. So this is when the Fog of War goes off, and then a little while later, Traction gets flipped over by the spikes and then flipped out of the arena by Rapid. And Jonathan Pierce claims that was a key moment that was caused directly by the Fog of War. And I think if you're trying to point these things out and make things up to try and make Fog of War seem like more than it is, that is a strong sign that the Fog of War is stupid.
You see, he's hyping it now, but once there's been a conversation with Lucy Rogers, he's no longer hyping it. I really think, and this, for the record, is the sort of wow thing that I messaged you about during the episode, that conversation.
Yeah.
I think this is a turning point where they're going to start paving the way to scrap it for next series. I think they're going to stop trying to make out that it's this brilliant thing and start letting it go. Because there is a moment later in the episode where I think Jonathan Pierce just sort of, and no one can see anything, and yeah, let's all sit and wait for 10 seconds.
I didn't, when I was rewatching this just before the episode, I only watched the fight, so I didn't rewatch the conversation with Lucy. But my recollection of that is that basically all she has to say about it is no one can see anything.
Yeah, she does make a valid point about it being useful for spinners getting spun up.
Yeah.
Which is, so far, the only valid argument I've seen in its favour. Although I wouldn't mind seeing it back next series just to see if teams design around it by putting bright lights on their robot or something. Or just making a robot that's super tall and comes above it, you know.
Like some giant dinosaur, for example.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. But her key point was that the judges can't. I think she made a comment that it makes it really hard for the judges to sort of decide what's going on. I don't think she likes it, but maybe I'm projecting. In fact, I probably am projecting. I don't know what she thinks.
I'm surprised that she was not allowed to say anything negative, but that anything negative she said made the final cut. And that, to me, is the sign that they're thinking what we're thinking with it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I also think, and I was doing a proper sort of, I was going to say number crunching, but that's a very grandiose term for literally just counting. But I feel like there have been a statistically unlikely, this is just a terrible sentence, there's been a big skew towards Fog of War on the button, I feel. Especially this episode.
There's been a lot of Fog of War. How many Fog of Wars were there? I reckon 4 or 5, maybe even 6.
Put it this way, the first 2 hits of the button were both Fog of War. Although at this point, using the term hit of the button is still a bit grandiose as well, because it's a flirtation with the button.
I swear it went off because Terahertz was near it at some point.
It was in that quarter of the arena. That's near enough. I don't know why you're complaining.
Oh dear.
Should we get on to Melee 2?
Yes, let's move on.
Apex, the biggest bar spinner in the competition.
Apex, a robot that is very dangerous and I don't think should have been allowed in.
Tell me more.
So, last series, in our discussions of last series, we talked about how the arena is very tough and a bit of a robot going through one of the panels there is all right because there's more behind it. Apex, later on in this episode, completely shattered one of those things. And it's like, that's so much more energy. And I am less confident in the arena as a result. And I think at least Craig's initial reaction was like, oh God, what have we done? And he made a comment that he was never going to make one like that again. I don't know if he'll stand to that or not. But I think unless you can in some way prove that bar isn't going to come flying off your robot, doing something with that much energy in it is dangerous.
The mistake you're making here is assuming that those panels are meant to be part of the protection for the audience, which they're not, because if they were, they'd be everywhere. Those panels are purely there because they wanted some sections of the wall to be higher, and audience members don't particularly appreciate sitting behind a piece of metal that stops them seeing anything. They had to be something clear, so polycarbonate is the obvious answer. That's not there to protect anyone. The protection is outside of that, and there is nothing at all to say that was in any danger of being breached.
No, that's true. That's true. That's a good point.
And you have to assume that the people that made this arena are under intense scrutiny from a number of different agencies to make sure that thing is up to scratch. I would also argue that a bar that has come off of a robot is then carrying less energy than one that's still attached, or would at least be transferring it in a less efficient way and therefore be less dangerous.
A bar that's still attached to a robot isn't going to get that far.
But when you look at BattleBots, which has the same style of arena, it would be completely feasible for a robot with its bar still powered up to impact one of those walls. And as far as I'm aware, the UK arena is built to a higher spec than that one.
In a shocking turn of events, the UK has higher health and safety standards than the rest of the world. Not necessarily to the benefit of the citizens of the United Kingdom, although in this case it is to the benefit. That's fair enough. Maybe this is another situation where a clearer sort of like indication for the purposes of television that the stuff that's between the audience and the arena was undamaged, you know, like because it was, yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like if there was, but you know, if what's his face, the comedian guy, name was gone.
Dara.
I don't know why that left my brain. It just did. If Dara was like at the end of that when talking to Craig was like, but you know, no damage at all done to the audience bit or something like that would be better. It would make me and presumably other members of the audience feel better if nothing else.
Something that we had in certainly the first series of the reboot, and maybe in the second and third, was people from the production team, specifically people from Robo Challenge, actually, I think, to sort of Alan Young, James Cooper, those sort of people, did occasionally come on when the arena was broken and explain what was going on. It would have maybe been quite nice to have that. But again, I think the BBC were happier with the idea of, oh, that was really dangerous, than they would be with the idea of, oh, that was actually completely fine, being the overall message.
I see why they edited it that way.
I'm also not convinced, and there will be people who were there that will know for sure, but from the replays that I've seen, I'm not sure the claim that it went through that panel and then hit the outside wall is even that accurate.
I don't know. I didn't watch closely enough to even speculate.
I'd be interested to know from someone who was there, did it even reach the outer wall? Not that it matters if it did. I'm just wondering if that's, again, that being hammed up a bit.
Yeah. Who knows?
Man, I said I was going to be devil's advocate on this stuff today. That hasn't happened. I'm throwing accusations around left, right and centre. Next up, in what I hope is alphabetical order, is Terahertz.
Terahertz.
Little hint of self-doubt there.
What comes next? Is it V or is it T?
They're very similar sounding letters.
Yeah.
You know what I really loved about the introduction for Terahertz?
What did you really love about the introduction for Terahertz?
They're finally acknowledging the old series.
Yes.
I think this has happened earlier in this series, but it's the first time I really noticed it, where they were showing photos from the pits back in Series 4 or Series 5, and talking about competitors as being real veterans. The only time they really did that before was Behemoth, and that was just, oh, you've been here before and you're still here. And that was kind of it.
I feel like there are actually clips in this of old Terahertz as well, like the old boxier versions.
Well, there were at the very least still images of, you know, John in the pits back in the day.
Yeah. I wonder if that was like a license. Is it the same production company that's doing Robot Wars this time as who did it before?
It's definitely the same production company as Series 7. I don't know about the older series because it's Mentor, and I know it was them for Series 7 because lots of people weren't very happy with them, so their name got banded around quite a lot.
Because I wonder if there's some like licensing things where they just haven't got permission to use footage from the earlier series, even if they wanted to.
Maybe, but surely if a contestant comes along with their own photos from it or something, they can use that.
Well, you say that, but then like contestants in Robot Wars can't compete with the same robot with the same name in BattleBots and vice versa. You know, it's sort of like, you know, this is the, you know, they're
that's
weirdly
a contractual thing.
But that's what I mean. Like they're, you know, these things are weirdly particular about what can and can't be reused and shared and stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was a different production company that did the really early series of Robot Wars, and they were like, no, you can't use any of the footage of that, and you can't use anything else like that. It wouldn't surprise me.
For footage, yes, but again, the idea of just showing the images of the robots shouldn't be an issue, I wouldn't have thought.
Bureaucracy is a very strange thing, my friend.
Very true, very true. It's surprisingly difficult to find the production company that made it before. I'm sure it was mentored at least for Series 7, though.
Yeah, I'm willing to believe you.
Good. My other favourite thing about Terahertz was John Reed's chair. Never has a man looked more in place in a chair than John Reed did in the pits. That's not the kind of thing that you can fold up and put in the boot. He has bought that because he likes that chair. That was probably as much effort to transport as the robot itself. But he's like, no, I'm having my chair.
Yeah. Well, power to him.
It looked as though it might even have had one of those little tie-on cushions on the bottom of it.
Yeah, I'd rather go to the effort of bringing a chair than have to stand around all day.
I don't know. That's the thing. It's not a chair, Sam. You're not getting this.
I'm sorry.
You can get a fold-up chair. It packs up nicely in the boot. This was a specific chair. And I'm not moving on from this until you understand that.
It was a specific chair, okay? Great sentimental value, perhaps. Do you want like a detailed analysis of a chair?
That's a chair on which he had the first idea for kilohertz.
How well engineered is it? Does it? How well would it survive against carbide? That is the question.
Well, we know exactly how well it would survive against frostbite because they basically tried it.
How well would it survive against Terahertz's axe?
Depends if it's a good hit, doesn't it?
Well, in this episode, I think it was on form. I don't think I've ever seen.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever seen Terahertz like that effective. I don't know, but it was on form and it was delivering huge hits.
I've never seen John drive it that well. I've never seen the hammer hitting that hard, which I'm guessing is due to it being warmer.
All that often. That's the other thing. He hit so many times. Oh, so good.
It all really came together. I mean, it will have helped that he was up against maybe some less experienced drivers at times.
Yeah.
And also up against Apex, which is barely mobile at the best of times. Got a lot of good hits on that. And that final hit on Rapid in the final as well. Straight to that back panel.
Yeah. Oh, it was good. It was good. I was so happy to see it on form. I thought they were going to win as well. I was like, after I sort of seen that, thinking just like, Terahertz, they're doing it. They're in. See them in the final.
That's the thing, though. It still lacked a certain something when it came to that final. I think it's just lacking in drive as much as anything.
So, I mean, we can talk about the final. I think he was just thoroughly outdriven. I think if he'd been able to get more hits, he might have stood a chance. But just so thoroughly outdriven, he didn't stand a chance.
I wonder if there was an element of conserving gas as well for self-righting.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. So Rapid did a fantastic job of. So Rapid is obviously very well engineered and very good at getting underneath Terahertz all the time. It just managed it every single time, pretty much. And then they did an amazing job of keeping them on their back, which meant they had to use a lot of gas to get back upright and stuff. And then they're in this situation where it's like, well, we've got to make sure our hits count, so they don't use it nearly as often as they maybe would otherwise.
That's a very good tactical analysis that I can't add to, which is a shame for the discussion.
Well, the other thing is before we move on entirely from Terahertz quickly is how often Terahertz got stuck in Vulture.
Yes, and also the damage that Vulture did to Terahertz's axe blade as well.
Yeah, I guess it was less Terahertz getting stuck on Vulture and more like Vulture almost being like stuck inside the axe of Terahertz, because it's like where Terahertz is hitting these sort of like sharp upward edges, it's sort of like almost like pincering at that point. The axe is almost pincering that bit of Vulture. It's sort of, it was quite spectacular, really.
It's basically getting that chunk taken out of it, isn't it? And it is interesting because there were some very juicy workings to hit. But at the same time, the one thing that weapon is really not designed to come into contact with is the edge of a panel, which is exactly what was happening to it there.
Yeah, it took a lot of damage. Sort of like, was this? Am I right in thinking this is a different axe head? I feel like last year it was like a pointier, sharper one.
I don't think so.
Or have I just got a different sort of axe in my head? I don't know. It just.
Are you thinking as in literally a spike almost?
Like more closer to the axe that Shunt has. I just have a recollection that Terahertz, at least...
No, Terahertz hasn't had that for a long time. Kilohertz did.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm getting confused then.
What I'd like to see him bring is more of a sort of beta hammerhead as well, for situations like that.
Yeah, I wonder if he gets too close to being beta at that point.
Well, no, just bring a hammer like Thor has,
Yeah.
I also have to wonder how much of what is basically beta is now inside Terahertz. Granted, the whole hammer mechanism is different because it's pneumatic rather than electric. But in terms of drive and things like that, you have to imagine he's probably transferred a couple of bits over.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of commonality. I mean, just for the sake of reuse of prior experience, if nothing else. Like you're not gonna, I'm sure there is a lot of commonality in the basics of those robots.
The other big upgrade to Terahertz that we really didn't have to mention because of the heat it was in was the massively improved armour on the front.
Yeah.
That's gone from Hardox to Armox. That's a hell of an upgrade.
It didn't really get a chance to show itself.
Completely untested.
Yeah. Well, it got a couple of dings, didn't it? Like it got scratched up over the course of the heat.
Yeah, but that's just like taking the layer of tarnish off, really, isn't it? It had one hit from Apex to deal with, which it deflected onto the polycarbonate, which then shattered. It didn't have enough attention drawn to it. That was a lot of damage by Terahertz's standards.
Wow,
that is.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, left front. If you rewatch it.
I don't have it queued up, so
you're going to try and forget this episode exists, don't you? Aren't you? Words. You're going to try and wipe this episode from your memory.
I think watching it 1.5 times is enough.
1.5.
Oh, so I skipped all the fluff the second time round.
Oh yeah, cheesy. I was imagining you literally stopped at the 30-minute mark.
No.
I still enough for one day.
I mean, in terms of minutes watched, though, it's probably less than 1.5 because of how few fights there are.
Very true, yeah.
So Terahertz got stuck to Vulture quite a lot, but then in the melee, Apex came and joined the fray, and then all three of them were piled up together, and like Apex got itself wedged, so its wheels weren't on the ground anymore, and it was sort of like wedged, I think, in the flame pit or something against the other robots, and then it got freed. Was it like Shunt that came in and just sort of gave him a big shove to free him up again?
Yeah, which again I think is another reason we had that conversation with Lucy Rogers, because there was another point later in the episode where the House Robots have had to free two robots that were stuck together.
Yeah, it was Terahertz and Vulture again.
And it was them again, wasn't it?
And it was Matilda that came in, shoved them a bit, and then flipped them. And then what made me laugh there is there was like a flip that freed them, and it left Vulture upside down. And then there was a cut, and the next time we saw it, Vulture was the right way up again.
Yep.
We didn't see itself right.
I think it got righted. That's why. I think at that point the overhead arm wasn't working.
Yeah, which is fair enough. That's like,
because it had Terahertz jammed in it.
I mean, it's fair enough that it was righted by presumably by Matilda.
Oh yeah, it's just objectively the right thing to happen, isn't it? I suppose we should talk about Vulture because we haven't really given them their moment yet.
We've talked around them a lot.
There's a significant danger that we could reopen an old wound with their intro, couldn't we? The whole, are you an engineer? Are you an engineer? None of you are engineers.
But none of them claimed that it would give them an advantage.
Very true, very true.
And that's all I will say about it.
I will say, these guys aren't newcomers. They do have a featherweight. They have made robots before. This wasn't just a bunch of people deciding to go do Robot Wars. These are people that have at least a basic understanding of what they're doing.
Yeah, I did suspect that might be the case because while Vulture's not the best robot in the world, it wasn't bad enough that I thought that was their first robot ever.
It's a really well put together machine.
I was surprised actually. I was expecting it to do a lot worse than it did, which is not to say it did particularly well, but I was expecting it to do worse.
It wasn't terrible. It wasn't good, but it wasn't terrible.
It wasn't the worst robot I've seen.
I really like the idea of it. I just think the weapon needs more weight in the actual spinning part.
Yeah, it's a bit pathetic really at the top, isn't it? It's a nice idea though.
I feel like there's more energy being carried by the arm coming over than there is in the spinning part.
Yeah, maybe.
That's how it looks visually when it hits something, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when it hit, like, you got a few sparks and you heard clanging and stuff, so, like, it's, it was always working at least, as long as the arm was, as long as it could articulate it, like, it spun up every time, I think. But yeah, just not enough to do any big damage.
They were really unfortunate to face the only robot that could damage their weapon mechanism twice as well. And I think if they had got up against Traction, that could have been a pretty good fight.
Yeah, it's a shame that never happened, really, because what was like a pinched wire or something they just couldn't get to in time.
Yeah, which is, in a sense, a design flaw to allow that to happen, but that is the kind of thing that you expect from a first heavyweight build, isn't it?
I suspect, though, that with basically any robot, you're likely, or it's possible to end up in a situation where something breaks so far down in the robot that it would require a complete disassembly. And then if you are unlucky with the timings of your fights and stuff, and it ends up that you haven't, they're like, well, we need to do this fight in 20 minutes, and it's like, well, we don't have time to do it, then what are you going to do? I wonder if they, like Carbide, had an overnight thing to get spare parts or whatever, then, would they have had this problem? Would they have had to withdraw? I don't know.
I suppose that depends on the tolerances that you build into your design. If you're going to make something like Crackers and Smash, then everything is basically down to millimetre precision. Whereas if you're making something like Frostbite, you've got a lot of airspace in there to be running wires through and things. Everything's going to be quite accessible. And I feel like robots like Apollo are kind of like that as well, because there's more room in there than the components need. Whereas with Vulture, it was a very compact design.
When the other approach is the modular Sabretooth approach, wasn't it? It's sort of like, we'll design it so that it comes apart like Lego, and then just build a bunch of replacement parts. So like, I imagine they could, as long as if it takes damage really far down in like the one of the driving pods or whatever, then it's like, we'll just replace the whole pod, and it's quite quick and easy to do. So that's the other approach.
Not necessarily a money efficient approach though, is it?
No, probably not.
There's one other thing that I'd like to draw attention to from this melee that I feel may have been missed. Ordinarily, I might not bring this up, but I feel the need to praise the things that are praiseworthy. There's a good moment when Vulture is immobile on one side, where Jonathan Pierce actively talks about what the rules are, and talks about moving outside of your circumference, and goes, oh no, they're not doing that, they're only mobile on one side, they're going to get counted out. Let's have more of this again. Let's actually talk about what the rules are.
Just to return that serve towards you, we then see Noel Sharkey hit a button to start a timer, and then no timer starts.
Oh no!
Let's bring it straight back down to the complaining.
I mean, I hadn't noticed that, but it's the sort of thing you'd notice.
There's no timer on the screen, and then there's a shot inside the control booth, and there's no timer on that screen either.
Is a timer necessary when we know it's being counted down, though?
Well, we know because we saw him press the button, but the people driving the robots don't know because there's no indication on their screen.
Well, there may have been an indication on their screen. They're not watching the broadcast we're watching. That's time travel. That doesn't exist.
Not yet.
Although if time travel exists in the future, does that mean it exists now?
This is not the place. It might be the time, but it's not the place.
Well, it's always the time by that theory, isn't it? So, I mean, we've kind of spoken about what came next in terms of the judges segment.
Yep.
And we've kind of spoken about what came next in terms of Traction versus Apex. But I'll happily talk about that again, because that was beautiful.
I have one thing to say about this, which is I'm surprised that Dead Metal was in the arena.
Yes!
So far, and we saw this a lot last episode, so much that Jonathan Pierce was commenting on it, I don't think we saw Dead Metal once, or maybe it was Matilda we never saw. And then it was always Shunt and Kill-A-Lot. Those are the two robots that can best deal with the high-energy spinners. And then we never see Matilda in with a spinner, it's very rare to see these other house robots in the arena with the big spinners, and I'm stunned that Dead Metal was in there with Apex. Stunned.
To be fair, if you're going to risk a different house robot against one of the spinners, it might as well be the one that literally can't drive properly when it's spun up. It's going to break itself before it breaks anything else. So
yeah, as we see.
I mean, you'd like to give Traction some credit for this, and granted, it is the contact with the front plough that's half theirs that is really the main inciting event for the rapid unplanned disassembly. But then when you watch it again, you can see that Apex is starting to jitter before it's even up to speed fully. Once it is up to speed fully, the best it can do is turn on the spot. And a slight breeze or some falling dust, you can't help feeling, would have done that.
Maybe whatever phantom that keeps triggering the pit button is what caused it.
The Series 10 champion is a poltergeist. It would explain a lot.
Who would it be the ghost of, I wonder?
I'm now way too deep in thought about that. Ghost of the original Matilda that was killed by Razor?
Yeah, ghost of George Francis.
Almost started reeling off dead Robot Wars competitors. Probably not the best thing.
Let's not do that. As far as I'm aware, George Francis is still alive, just not active in Robot Wars.
Not only is he alive, he looks scarily like my mum. And after this, I'm going to show you the photo comparison because it is terrifying. And no, that's not making the show notes.
It's going in the super secret private chat. Amazing. Oh dear. Ghost of Killy Cranky ruining more fights for me.
I mean, you can't argue that fight was ruined. It was vastly improved, really, wasn't it?
What, this one, Traction Apex?
Yeah. Because otherwise, all we're going to see is Apex knocking the tracks off of a robot and that being it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm now looking round for fights worth talking about. There's like tiny elements of every fight, so I think Vulture Bucky really does show off the surprisingly good drive on Vulture. And obviously, Traction versus Rapid is technically a record-breaking fight, but...
Record-breaking fight, both in terms of how long it was and also how often the entire fight was repeated in one episode. It's like I've watched this fight about 1 million times now. Literally 1 million times.
What I find interesting, actually, there's two other things interesting about that fight. First is I really like the little sort of claws they added to the top of the flipper arm.
I didn't notice any claws.
They put little sort of... What's the best way to describe this? Basically, yeah, little claws on the top of the flipper so that when they got under something, it didn't just run straight off the other side. You know, the kind of thing that if Cassius had had it, it would have won Series 2 with ease.
Is someone bitter?
No, I've always been completely accepting of that result, ever since I was a child. It's never bugged me at all.
It sure seems that way.
Should I assume this isn't the first time I've mentioned it on the podcast?
I mean, that I'm now aware of it, having no memory of Series 2, suggests that maybe you brought it up more than once.
That seems like the kind of thing I'd do. So that's point number one. The second is all this talk of Rapid only having put them out so quickly because they had a leak. Surely you'd be looking to do that anyway. Surely they're not going to play with their food. They're just going to try and win quickly. That's what anyone would be doing. With the possible exception of Apollo.
I don't know. I've got to think that they are in some way incentivized to put on a bit of a show, but maybe not. I don't know.
But then I think the production team have very intentionally picked a variety of robots, some providing the effectiveness and some providing the fun. You know, Bucky are there to provide the fun. They've done that job, and that's great. Rapid, as a team that really should be contenders for the title here, should not have to worry about making things more entertaining than robots throwing each other around already is.
But let's just, hypothetical situation, let's say that Rapid do that in every fight they're in. They win every fight with an out of the arena in under 10 seconds. Do you seriously think the producers would not have something to say about that?
They might do, but it's not a legitimate thing to be complaining about.
I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying they'd have something to say about it. So I suspect that teams are in some way incentivized not to do that every time.
But this is a legitimate sporting competition, and they said so themselves.
Yes, those words have indeed been written by a producer of the show, but that doesn't necessarily make it so.
You can write rules and you can select competitors to try and make the most entertaining spectacle possible. Beyond that, you cannot interfere. If a robot is going to come out and be ruthlessly efficient, that is fine. That is their prerogative. You cannot and should not try to stop them.
I'm fine with it. I think the producers might try to stop it, and I think they have done in the past.
Who are you thinking?
Am I correct? Like old series, am I correct in thinking like the introduction of active weapons rules and stuff was because push bots kept winning?
So we're going to talk Storm 2. I'm okay with this.
I'm just saying. It's as far as it wouldn't be the first time the producers have messed around with things to try and stop a robot from being too efficient.
Okay, so there are two elements to this argument.
Oh God, what have I done?
One is the introduction of the active weapon rule. That is the correct approach to trying to deal with a problem like that. I personally don't think it was a problem, but if they saw it as a problem, making a rule about it was the correct way to try and deal with it. In the same way that they've tried to deal with spinners being dominant by adding entanglement. That is absolutely fine. What there are then accusations of them having done in Series 7 is not fine in terms of incentivizing Storm 2 but to be more entertaining by trying to kick them out, essentially. So, the idea of, oh, you didn't use your weapon in a whole fight, so we're going to try and make the judges judge against you because of it. That sort of thing is then the dodgy ground that we cannot allow to be part of the sport. You make rules, you apply them fairly. If you're not happy with what they made, you change them for next time.
No, retcon all the things.
I have heard stories from the very early series of fights being refilmed because they weren't entertaining enough, but making sure they maintained the same outcome. But I don't know how legitimate that is.
That's very real wrestling. I feel like something... Am I correct in thinking that something similar happened in this episode? I feel like there was something about terahertz and Apex where it was sort of like a fight started and was stopped and then restarted and then not shown.
Yeah, so what apparently happened, and I remember reading about this on the day it happened, was that the fight was started, and before anything else meaningful happened, there was damage to the arena. So they just restarted the fight from the very beginning rather than where it got stopped, and decided to show it in such a way that it was as if the damage never happened, which to me seems fine.
Well, so what I feel like I read was that in that damage, Apex took damage in some way or something, which meant that because it didn't do very well in the in that melee. I don't think. I think it lost its spinner very quickly.
Yeah, it got one hit in on terahertz, which was a decent hit, and then stopped, which I didn't think anything of because that just seems to be Apex to me. One hit wonder.
It was my understanding that it had that might have been because of because I assume it was Apex that damaged the arena.
Well, it would have to be out of the robots that were in there. So yeah, maybe the process of breaking the arena did them some damage, but that would have impacted them just as much in a fight that was restarted from the 5-second mark as a fight that was restarted from the 0-second mark. I think in competitive terms, I doubt that would have made a difference. Whether they could have just as easily put that in the broadcast and whether that would have been valuable, I suppose, is a different argument.
I mean, they had time.
Well, yeah, they had time for lots of things.
I was just bringing it up just because
we could have reinstated the gauntlet this episode if we wanted to. There was that much time.
That's true. No, I was just bringing it up just because they still will occasionally sort of restart fights and then not show the original. So that's all. That's all I was bringing up.
Yeah, that one I'm okay with. I dare say we could come up with some cases very close to it that I wouldn't be okay with.
Yeah, I'm sure we could.
And that, I mean, unless you've got anything else, that really brings us to the end of the action. We've spoken about the final. It was a good final.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate. I want to try and end on a positive. I enjoyed this fight the second time, and I'm sad that Terahertz lost. I'd like Terahertz a lot. But the way that Rapid won and the decisiveness with which it won as well, I thought was fantastic. Like they were just dominant from the word go, or from the word activate. Maybe they were there doing all the right things, and it was a tense fight. I was like really into it because I was like, obviously I'm rooting for Terahertz, so I really want Terahertz to win, but it's just like, Rapid dominating completely the whole fight. So it was good. I enjoyed it.
You know what I've just seen on the AMA thread?
No?
Last time we spoke about Rapid, we had a discussion about the whole idea of it can flip a transit van a meter in the air. And obviously that has been asked about, whether that is, an empirical claim based on testing or whatever. And they are doubling down on this claim.
So if they got that robot next to an actual transit van, they could lift the whole thing from anywhere. So transit van on the road, they drive up next to the transit van and they flip it and they get the entire thing a meter into the air.
The response I'm reading, because I had to post this question for someone else who couldn't make it, is you provide the van and we'll do the flipping. So if any listeners have a van to spare...
If anyone has a van, send them a van. No, well, I say that. They've got £25,000 they spent on this robot. They must have the money to buy a flipping van.
Flipping van. It has been... I mean, the other thing I haven't read it. We heard it on the episode, was that apparently they were running at 20% power. Now, that feels like the kind of number that's been pulled from an orifice. But if they were on reduced power and were getting some quite convincing out of the arenas, I'd be interested to see them at 100%.
I'm dubious about that 20% claim, I have to say.
I don't doubt that they were on reduced power.
Oh no, I'm willing to believe that wasn't the best it can do. I think a lot of teams come in with that problem of this isn't the best it can do. It's just part of the sport. But 20% seems a bit low.
Seems a bit round as well to me.
Suspiciously round number.
I'm just scrolling through for any more interesting things, but I'm scrolling too fast to read, which completely defeats the object.
Real smooth.
Suppose this means that all that's left to do is our ratings. 2 episodes in a row, we have ratings. And if I can remember how to send stuff, they will be coming to you very soon.
I have faith in your computing abilities.
It's coming over Skype, so it could be a while.
I have faith in your abilities. I don't have faith in Skype's.
Episode 15 ratings coming on at you. Today, Sam, I would like you to rate this episode by comparing it to a Robot Wars team mascot. You have 4 options in front of you. You may know some of your own. Take us through them.
So we have Super Bunny from 101, which is indeed a mascot that I vaguely remember. Ninja Sheep from Mega Morg that I don't remember. Bucky
For
the
record,
mascot.
that was multiple sheep. That is sheep, the plural.
Oh, Ninja Sheep. Well, you should have written Ninja Sheeps then.
That's how that works.
That's how you pluralise sheep, right? I'm surprised. Just you've distracted me now. I'm surprised. when I was talking about octopuses, and I've just done it again now, I made a point of saying octopuses and not octopi or octopodes or octopodes. I don't know how to pronounce the weird version of that. And I'm kind of surprised no one called me out on it.
Well, clearly our audience is just uneducated.
No, clearly our audience is educated enough to know that the correct pronunciation of octopus, or the plural of octopus, is, in English, octopuses, because it's an English word. Anyway, there's some controversy for you. Sorry, so Super Bunny from 101, Ninja Sheep from Mega Morg, Bucky the Mascot from Bucky the Robot, and the Grim Reaper from the Grim Reaper. I am going to liken this episode to the Grim Reaper for the spectacular death of Apex and for the death of my enjoyment of this episode because of all the fluff.
You see, I'm torn. I could give it to Super Bunny because of the fluff.
Yeah, that's true.
Or I could give it to Mega Morg's Ninja Sheep because that thing is about as robust as Apex. So I'm wondering if there's some way I could combine the two, because I am noticing that on the picture I've used, Mega Morg does have a bit of Dietor's fur as well.
Mm, yeah.
Which makes it the perfect storm of mascotness for this episode. So that is my highly evasive answer to my own question.
How are your answers so evasive, man? Like, you think of these things and then don't have a straight answer for it.
I'm an experienced public speaker, and an experienced public speaker knows that the less you actually say, the better.
An experienced public speaker, famous for TV spots and radio spots and a podcast.
Unfortunately in that order, but we'll address that.
Soon you will be Ryan, the podcaster, also appears on TV.
I'm glad that you've brought it up in a way that might stay in the edit now as well.
You're welcome.
Best thing is, I had a real sort of progression of status during those 4 appearances. I went from person that was at the game to fan to Oxford City FC supporter to Oxford City superfan.
Superfan, nice.
Yeah. That was a very over-enthusiastic sort of breakfast radio host.
I mean, I think superfan is fair.
I think it's insulting to all the other people that were there that have been fans for years when I rocked up like 3 years ago.
Fair enough. I don't know enough about football to know, but given how much you tweet about it, I think it's fair enough.
What, you mean like all of my Twitter?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I'm saying how much you tweet about it, not in terms of the volume, I guess, but in terms of the ratio of football tweets to anything else.
The percentage being essentially 100.
Yeah.
We'll take a quick look at who we've got coming up next episode, because next episode is good. We've got Concussion, we've got Nuts 2, hopefully working this time. We've got Androme 4000, the 2-stage crusher. We've got Tauron, we've got Iron Ore, and we've got the kegs. That is a potentially beautiful episode.
I hope that's good. I hope we get to see that 2-stage crusher in action. And from the spoilery previews I've seen, Nuts 2 does appear to be working.
From the spoilery previews I've seen, Androme 4000 does also seem to be working.
Excellent. Are we done then?
I feel like we are, and that feels wrong.
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/15.
Yes.
Is this 15? spinnerproof.com/episodes/15. There you can find links to all the robots we've talked about, among other things. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet us your favourite tabletop board game.
Ooh, you planned that one ahead, didn't you?
That may or may not involve a board. It doesn't have to have a board. It could be anything you want, as long as it's playing on a
The
tabletop.
term board in board game refers to the Old English word for table. I thought this was common knowledge. Like boardroom, you know, the room with the table in it. Or cupboard, a table for cups. It's not hard.
You know, that makes complete sense. I've never thought about it before. Spinnerproof Podcast.